you guys are going to be creating these two foldables today in your interactive notebook to talk about primary and secondary succession. It's on page number 82. I'm going to show you how to set these up, and let's get started. Here we go. So we're going to talk about the difference between primary and secondary succession. So looking at primary succession, you guys should have just put together your little foldable here. You saw me struggle to find glue. Come on, guys, bring glue. Stages of primary succession, we start with stage number one. Stage number one is going to be where there is bare rock and no ecosystem existed previously. So looking at our pictures, which one of these pictures do you think would represent a bare rock where there was no ecosystem? That means no life, no plants, no animals. So looking at these, which one would you pick? If you picked this one, congratulations, you are correct. So we're going to go ahead and add our picture here. Goodness, this glue stick is awful too. But we're going to add our picture here. So an example of this would be after a volcano. Volcanoes would be the type of catastrophe where it would create a whole new landscape where all the vegetation in the area was either destroyed, and so it's starting over, or where a volcano created an island. When we talked about hotspots back in our plate tectonic unit, this is where new land is going to be created. So this could also be at a mid-ocean ridge where two plates are pulling apart and that magma is rising up and creating new land there that comes to the surface. This would be an example of a place that would go through primary succession. So in primary succession, the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to see the introduction of pioneer species. So think to your social studies class. When you think about the pioneers, those were the people who came to an area first. They were the first to travel out west, and they were the ones who settled there first. So these would be the first species that show up. Do you think that we would be able to see giant trees just kind of grow from nothing? No, we wouldn't be able to see that. We would need to see species that require a lot less energy and would be able to survive on completely bare rock. So we're going to see in stage two, we're going to see pioneer species. And those pioneer species are things like moss and lichen. Now, as the moss and lichen grow, they live, and then they die. When they die, they start to build the foundation that bigger plants need because as they decompose, they create soil. So this is where we're going to see soil. Soil is formed from the dead pioneer species. So most of the area is still going to be barren rock. So if we look at our pictures, this is going to be what we see next happen. So let's go ahead and glue our little picture down in there. Goodness, this is going to happen every single time. So in stage three, now that we have a foundation of soil, so soil has started to build up on the land, it's going to allow for bigger plants to be able to form. So this is where we're going to start seeing things in stage three like grasses and small shrubs. And then we might start to actually even see young forests, so small plants or small trees be able to actually start to grow here. So young forests. Begin. So now we're going to start to see grasses take over and small shrubs or bushes or things like that be able to actually be supported in an ecosystem. So this is going to be our next picture here. Look at that, guys. Didn't happen this time. And then finally in stage 4, so in stage 4, this is where we will see mature trees and forests. So just like in stage 2, where the dead pioneer species started to break down and create that soil, the same thing is happening in stage 3. We have more life, which means poetically we have more death. And so it's going to actually be able to break down and create that soil there too. So now we're at a point where an ecosystem can support big trees and can support full forests. So this is going to be called a climax community. So think about in ELA when you talk about the climax in a story. So that's where it reaches the top point right before it pivots or before it changes. So think back to your understanding of what a climax is in ELA to help you understand, like in science, this means that this is where a ecosystem is at its max. This is where it's at its best point. And last picture here. We're going to see most of the vegetation then occurs here. So just to recap, in primary succession, this occurs in an area that there was no ecosystem before, bare rocks, and then there is going to be stage 2 where we see pioneer species. Those pioneer species are things like moss and lichen. The soil is forming from those dead pioneer species as they start to break down. And then we see stage 3, grasses, small shrubs, young forests begin to appear. And finally, we reach the climax community in stage 4, where we see mature trees and forests. So you can hypothesize too, what do you think happens as we go from stage 1 to stage 4? We see what happens with plants, but what do you think happens to animals and why? So I want you to reflect on that question and answer it here before you move on. All right, so let's look at the difference between primary succession and secondary succession. So don't glue this in quite yet because it's going to go down here and it'll make it really, really hard to write. We'll glue that at the very end. So looking at secondary succession, if primary succession is a place where no ecosystem existed, secondary succession is going to occur in a place that had a previous ecosystem. So there was already an ecosystem there. And this is going to occur after a catastrophe. Now, a catastrophe is going to be any sort of environmental change that occurs, and these are usually going to be really short-term environmental changes, so things like flooding, fires, hurricanes, volcanoes, anything in that area that's going to have a negative impact on the ecosystem, where the ecosystem is going to have to essentially repair itself. So it's going to have to heal after some sort of catastrophe. So this could be after, in Texas, for instance, we had Hurricane Harvey last year. So a lot of areas had severe flooding where they had to rebuild after this. And ecosystems are really, really cool, where if we give them the time, they will heal themselves. And so this is the stages or the steps that an ecosystem takes to heal itself. So this occurs in an area that already had an ecosystem and occurs after catastrophe. So looking at our pictures, here's an example I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to be. It kind of looks like farmland, and we're going to hypothesize in a little bit about how is it that humans can affect succession, so maybe keep that in mind. So we've got now an area where there's not a lot of vegetation, but we can see there was at some point an ecosystem that was present there. So that's our first step here. In stage 2, now this is where it becomes very similar to primary succession. But because there was already a settlement, air quotes, settlement there, we're not necessarily going to see those those pioneer species again. But we are going to skip directly to stage 2 over here, where we already have that soil that was formed, and so we're not having to build soil again. And so we're going to look at stage 2 in secondary succession. Looks really similar to stage 3 in primary succession. So in secondary succession, we're going to start to see that soil is present, because that's important. So there's soil present, and grasses begin to appear again. So we're going to see some of those grasses and things start to take over. Now, if you've ever had a garden, you have actually probably witnessed secondary succession in action. When you have a garden and then you decide, I'm not going to plant anything this season, I'm going to let it just go, you can actually watch as your garden and the natural ecosystem kind of takes over. So the first thing you're going to start to see, you're going to see grasses start to grow, or those weeds start to grow through. And then if you leave it, it'll eventually take over that whole space, and it'll come to look just like the rest of the ecosystem around it. So we're going to see some of these grasses and things like that are going to be present again in that ecosystem. So then in stage 3, this is where we're going to see those small trees and shrubs begin to grow again. So this again, we would see here, we have smaller trees and shrubs. They start to take over and start to grow once the grasses have kind of established. Man, I was doing so good there. Start to establish their place back in the ecosystem. And then finally, we're up at the top again. And so this is where we see those mature trees. And forests. And again, this is at the very top. This is the kind of the highlight of our story here. So this is going to be the climax community. And then now you can go ahead and glue this down at the bottom, now that we have our writing in there, because it was going to be way too hard if we didn't. Goodness. And so we should have our 2 foldables in here. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to reflect on these 2 questions. How do humans affect succession? So we talked about flooding and forest fires and hurricanes and things like that. Humans don't have a lot of control over that. It'd be kind of cool if we did, but we don't. And so we want to look at what happens when humans play a role in this. How can we affect succession? How can we cause succession to have to occur in an ecosystem? So think about that and reflect on that. And then the second question, down here in the bottom, how could humans help the process of secondary succession along? This might be something you need to research, but I want you to take some time to think about this. How could humans help the process of secondary succession along? So we can't really create new land, and so we can't really help primary succession all that much. That's that's something that only happens in plate tectonics at divergent plate boundaries. But secondary succession is where ecosystems already existed. So how can we play a role in helping the process of secondary succession along? So go ahead and reflect and answer these two questions. If you need to take a little bit of time to research them, do that. And then I want you to think about your animal for your PBL. Has your animal's ecosystem experienced succession, most likely secondary succession, in any way? That might be a really good thing to research on Wednesday when you guys have your PBL workday.